All right, John chapter 11. Uh, we'll pick up in verse 45. We did talk this just kind of briefly, but um, it might be good for us to talk a bit more about it. Therefore, many of the Jews who had come to visit Mary and had seen what Jesus did believed in him. But some of them went to the Pharisees and told them what Jesus has done. Then the chief priests and the Pharisees called a meeting of the Sanhedrin. They asked, "What are we accomplishing? Here is this man performing many signs. If we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him, and then the Romans will come and take away both our temple and our nation." Then one of them, named Caiaphas, who was high priest that year, spoke up, "You know nothing at all. You do not realize that it's better for you that one man die for the people than that the whole nation perish." He did not say this on his own, but as high priest that year, he prophesied that Jesus would die for the Jewish nation, and not only for that nation, but also for the scattered children of God, to bring them together and make them one. So from that time on, they plotted to take his life. Therefore, Jesus no longer moved about publicly among the people of Judea. Instead, he withdrew to a region near the wilderness, to a village called Ephraim, where he stayed with his disciples. Okay, so the tail end of John 11. Yes, Robert.
Um, Try not to use that dreaded three-letter word, but
Why?
do we know the reason that they were afraid the Romans would come take away their temple and their nation if people believed in Jesus? That was my question too. And I did it without saying what.
Yes, and we'll get there in just a minute.
Okay.
So the beginning of John 11 is the resurrection of Lazarus. He's really sick. They send word to Jesus, who's across the Jordan River on the other, you know, miles away. He's sick. You should come because your buddy is not doing well. He waits till he's sure that Lazarus is good and dead. Then he comes to Bethany to see Mary and Martha and to perform this miracle in order that people would see his power as the Son of God, that he has the power of life and death, and that they would come to believe in him as the Messiah. So he comes, he raises Lazarus from the dead. Many people do marvel at Jesus's power. And as we read here right at the very beginning, they came to visit Mary, they saw what Jesus did, and they believed in him. Uh, Not everybody was excited that Jesus was raising people from the dead. The Jewish leaders, the Pharisees, the Sanhedrin, which is kind of a collection of Pharisees and priests and things. Um, the thing that is the most interesting, I think, in that paragraph is that when the Sanhedrin comes together to talk about what are they going to do about Jesus, what is it they say? Here is this man performing many signs. Period. There's no debate about whether he's doing these things or not. The sticking point is, how can we let this go on? Because if we do, there's going to be trouble. Which is the question. Why would they think that? If Jesus is the Messiah, if he's performing these miracles, if he's healing people, bringing people back from the dead, why would Rome care about that?
They didn't want him to be in power.
Because if he's the Messiah and he's been gathering these followers, then this last miracle is big. I mean, that's a huge deal. Nobody has ever done anything like that before. if word gets out and all of the people of Israel start to follow him, what do they want to do? Throw out the Romans. Throw out the. I mean, there will be a political upheaval. There will be rebellion against the Roman Empire, and the Jewish leaders are wise enough to know that the incredibly huge, powerful, sort of like limitless Roman military, whatever, industrial complex is so overwhelming that they'll just march into Jerusalem, they'll kill everybody, they'll burn everything down, and that'll be the end of it. That's really the big concern. If he tries to become the Messiah and to take the throne of David in Jerusalem, he will bring an invasion and destruction onto all the people of Judea. I believe that they have accurately assessed the situation. I don't think they're wrong about that. I think they're right that Jesus is performing miracles. I think that they're right that the people want to follow him. I think they're right that the people believe that he's the Messiah. And they're right that the Romans will not put up with that kind of nonsense.
And at this point, were they still expecting the great warrior?
Yeah.
Okay.
That is the only kind of Messiah that anybody is expecting at this point. He's going to come in and sit on the throne of David. He will reign forever. He'll be a great warrior, the conquering hero. He'll ride in on the white horse. He'll save Judea and kick those nasty Romans all the way back to Italy. Now, if they asked Jesus if that's the kind of Messiah he was going to be, he would have said, absolutely not. That's not what I'm here for. But that's what all the people, that's what all of them believe. He specifically calls out, they'll take away the temple and our nation. Already in their history, at least twice, the temple has been ransacked, looted, and destroyed. So they know that if Rome is going to do something again, that likely the temple would be destroyed again, and maybe this time for the last time.
Question.
Yes, sir.
This is more just your opinion, anybody's opinion. I understand, the geopolitical situation and the concern. Question comes in my mind is what do they sincerely, the person typically sincerely think the source of Jesus' powers is? Because if they think, if the believers from a state, I know if they use that, but if they really believe that, then okay, I understand what they get ready to get. But if they don't, I don't understand how they would choose this path and leaving these, divine.
What did the Pharisees see as the source of Jesus' power? Is it from God, because he's doing amazing things, or is it from Satan? I'm sure that they were wrestling with that question all the time. Because they've had that conversation with him before, about a house divided against itself cannot stand. Why would Satan give Jesus the power to cast out demons? And that doesn't even make sense. So I do believe that even within the Pharisees that there's some kind of division. There's some kind of, left side and right side of the aisle when it comes to Jesus. One is he's a faker, he's a charlatan, he's a troublemaker. The other side is he's doing things that nobody else has done. God has got to be with it. Guys like like Nicodemus, potentially Joseph of Arimathea, and others. There are Pharisees who do believe in the power that Jesus has. But we don't really have that kind of detail anywhere. my guess is that they don't know what to think. Because either way is scary. If he's powered by Satan, then he is not somebody to be messed with. And if he is powered by God, what does this mean for us if he really has been sent and is empowered by God to do all these things? Yeah, that would be really scary. And if somebody showed up here in town and was doing all kinds of miraculous signs like this, teaching God's truth, that would be the question that would go through most of the religious community here. Where does Joker come from? He's clearly a faker. He's got evil spirits going on or something. Or if he's really from God, then what got some thinking. What are we going to do? How do we respond to this? What should we be doing? And why did he come to him and not to us? So, yeah, that's probably my best answer. Caiaphas is the high priest. That was the position that changed every year. I don't know exactly how it was determined, if there was a vote or if it was selected by the council or what, but he is the high priest. And while everybody is talking back and forth and debating all this, he essentially says, idiots, morons. No, there's nothing for us to discuss. He's got to go, because if he doesn't go, we're all going to be destroyed. So it is better that Jesus die in the place for all of us than it is for all of us to die. And it's not clear from the text here, to me at least, if Caiaphas has made a prediction about Jesus earlier on, or if it has just happened in this meeting where he prophesied that Jesus will die for the Jewish nation, and not only for the nation, but also for the scattered children of God, to bring them together and make them one. I don't know what the timing of that is, but the truth is that he's right. Whether he would like for it to be right or not, he has accurately described the situation that Jesus is coming to give up his life so that the people of God can be saved. They can be rescued. Not just the Jews, but anyone who would believe in him, anybody who is seriously interested in following God and living according to his will. Jesus is going to be what brings everybody together. He is the rallying point. Caiaphas has got it figured out. It's a shame that he doesn't actually have it figured out for himself.
He was right, but for the wrong reason.
Yeah. Okay, so verse 53 and 54 tell us that Jesus left that area until it was the right time. And we've seen this kind of thing multiple times as we've been through the Gospels, that Jesus is maintaining control of the timeline and the schedule. It is not the right time. I mean, he could have gone in Jerusalem and the Pharisees could have had him arrested and he could have been killed then, but it is not the right time. And so until it's the right time, he's going to take off, and he heads off to somewhere around here. This is where Ephraim, the little village of Ephraim is. So here's Jerusalem. There's Ephraim. He's not super far away, but just far enough away that they don't mess with him probably. And then he stays there with the disciples until he doesn't. We don't really have. There's no time given there. So then verse 55 says, when it was almost time for the Jewish Passover, Many went up from the country to Jerusalem for their ceremonial cleansing before the Passover. They kept looking for Jesus, and as they stood in the temple courts, they asked one another, "What do you think? Isn't he coming to the festival at all?" But the chief priests and the Pharisees had given orders that anyone who found out where Jesus was should report it so that they might arrest him. Okay, so between 54 and 55, it kind of seems like at least a little bit of time has passed. I don't really know how much. He's been up in the village of Ephraim for a little bit, and now the time of Passover is drawing closer. Everybody went to Jerusalem for Passover. And so the opponents, the Pharisees and the priests and the everybody else are on the lookout watching for him because they know he will show up for the Passover because he always shows up for the Passover. He follows the rules. He does what the law says. And if the law says you come to Jerusalem for the Passover, that's what he will do. And it's interesting that they go right to the heart of where they have seen Jesus the most often in Jerusalem. They go to the temple courts. You know, they're kind of, I would assume, sort of standing around in little groups of twos and threes and kind of watching around and looking at the crowd. You see him yet? I don't see him yet. Well, let's keep our eyes peeled because he's bound to show up. He just can't not come in here and start teaching and preaching. So as soon as we see him, we'll nab him. But he doesn't show up just like that. And it's not just that they themselves are looking, but they've put out the word kind of like we have now. See something, say something. If you happen to put your eyes on Jesus, you need to come and tell your closest local Pharisee who will go and then report it so he can get arrested. Okay.
APB.
Everybody is on the watch for Jesus to show up. Did I miss it? I may have missed it. Verse 53 makes it pretty clear that they're not just interested in making him be quiet or trying to shut him down. They are absolutely planning, plotting, anticipating his death. When they see him, that'll be the end of Jesus. Yes, sir.
So at this point, they didn't know that they were going to kill him, and that he was going to save us from our sins.
The Pharisees would never have believed that last part. They would have been a big fan of the first part, to kill him. We've got to get rid of this guy, because if we don't, it's going to go bad for the whole nation. We have to shut him up.
Well, that was God's plan, anyway.
Again, they're working along with God, but they're not aware that they are. They're unknowing, unwitting players in this big drama. They think that they're doing God's work by eliminating him, and they're right, but for all the wrong reasons. They think that they're right because he is fooling the people and leading them astray, that he's taking them away from God. And God's vision is that they are making it possible for not just the Jews, but for anyone who believes to come back to God. They would never have gone along with that if they thought that's what the deal was. All right. That's the end of John 11. Any other questions or comments?
How can, I have a lot of questions.
How can?
How does God? He knows what they're doing is going to condemn them. Because they don't understand. I guess what, like you said, if somebody were to show up today and go, how are we gonna know for sure if we're following the right way? And how can God condemn us if we make the wrong decision? Because we don't know.
How can God expect that those people would have understood who Jesus was? That's kind of the question. Okay, well, for one, these Jewish leaders, the Pharisees, the teachers of the law, the priests, they are all extremely well versed in the Old Testament. They should know all the prophecies about the Messiah, about the coming king. They should have all that information. They should understand that God made the promise and that he's going to keep it. The difficult piece is that not just the Jewish leaders, but all of the Jewish people had sort of moved on from a view of a king who would be a king of righteousness and lead the people back to God. They are much more focused on the king as the conquering hero, as the savior of Israel to regain its prominence, to kick out all the invaders and the foreigners. So they have the prophecies, they have the promises, they could have, should have been looking for certain signs, which the Gospels have kind of pointed out to us along the way, where he was born, the circumstances of his birth, those some of those kind of things about his life have fallen into place to meet those prophecies. Another thing that they could have and should have been looking at is the ministry that Jesus was demonstrating or providing. I mean, he was teaching God's truth. He was calling people to righteousness and repentance. He was healing the sick, bringing sight to the blind, restoring lives, restoring people. And those are all things that the Messiah was going to do. So part of I would say that the burden and the responsibility really falls on the people, because they could have known and they should have known if they would have been willing to look at what Jesus was doing with their eyes wide open and their minds open as well. But they have this preconceived idea, this and only this is what the Messiah will be like.
Somebody who's gonna rule with an iron fist.
Yeah, he will come in with the sword in one hand, and be hacking and slashing his way all the way to the throne. Does that mostly, that's most of the question, right? Carol,
Is there anything written about what the Messiah will look like this time around? What do you like?
it'll be very different. There won't be any wondering like, hey, I heard that he showed up in St. George over the weekend. It won't be like that the next time. When he comes the next time, it'll be all at once and everybody will be aware. It's ironic that this discussion on Juneteenth. The emancipation of the slaves took place. The proclamation was 1863. Is that right? It's January 1st, 1863, I think, was the Emancipation Proclamation. And it took 2 years because of how primitive and isolated everybody was for the news to get all the way across the country to Texas, which was the last place where there was slavery. It had already occurred, they just weren't aware of it. When, if that were to happen today, within 15 seconds, the entire world would know that the slaves had been emancipated because there's so much technology. And I believe it'll be the same thing when he returns. It won't be like it'll take days or weeks or months for the news to get through that Jesus has come back to take his people home. It will be in a flat, hot second. You can go to passages that, like in 1 Thessalonians 5, or if you really want to mess up your mind, go read some Revelation about his return. And it will not be something that people wonder about. The clouds will be rolled back. There will be descending from the heavens. There'll be a loud trumpet call. It'll be no surprise to anybody.
It'll be huge.
Yes. No one will miss them.
Hold my beer.
That's Thessalonians what?
1 Thessalonians end of 4, beginning of 5, it talks about the trumpet call of God and people being caught up in the air, which is not the rapture. There's no rapture in the Bible, but you can fight with me about that later if you want to. When he comes back, he's coming back, period. So. All right, so we're going to move on from John 11. And the next thing that happens sort of in the chronological timeline happens in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. So I don't know how you would like to do that with your fingers in your Bible, but Matthew 20, Mark 10, and Luke 18.
That again?
Matthew 20, Mark 10, and Luke 18. What follows Jesus's departure from the region to go up to Ephraim, the next big thing is a declaration that Jesus makes, another prediction of what's going to happen to him. Mark 10 is the longest version of it, verses 32 up to 34. They were on their way up to Jerusalem with Jesus leading the way, and the disciples were astonished, while those who followed were afraid. Again, he took the 12 aside and told them what was going to happen to him. We're going up to Jerusalem. The Son of Man will be delivered over to the chief priests and the teachers of the law. They will condemn him to death. They will hand him over to the Gentiles, who will mock him and spit on him, flog him, and kill him. 3 days later, he will rise. In Luke's version, in Luke 18, he has one more verse after that says the disciples did not understand any of this. Its meaning was hidden from them, and they did not know what he was talking about. Otherwise, Matthew, Mark, and Luke are all pretty much the same. So Jesus is still not in Jerusalem. He is at a minimum up in the village of Ephraim. And he is making his way up to Jerusalem. And so he's going to end up going through, we'll see, he's going to go up through Jericho, which is like 5 miles from the Jordan River, 15 miles or so from Jerusalem. That route was a common route. Lots of people would have been familiar with that road. And so as they kind of pack everything up and begin to head towards Jerusalem for the last time, Jesus says to them one more time, here's the deal. I'm going to be delivered, condemned, mocked, flogged, and killed. Mark and Luke say killed. Matthew says crucified, which is the first time that that has been mentioned specifically. Crucifixion is something that only the Romans were allowed to do. So if Jesus really does talk about being crucified, he knows that the Romans are going to be involved in his death. Other than that little difference, the versions are all pretty consistent. Mark adds that Jesus says they will spit on him, and Luke adds that they will insult and spit on him. But other than that, it's the same plan. Luke points out the disciples didn't and maybe couldn't understand what Jesus was talking about. Luke says that it was hidden from them. I don't know who's doing the hiding. I don't know if this is it's hidden from them because they're just too young and too inexperienced and not really savvy enough to understand, or if it is something that God through his Holy Spirit is sort of like shielding that understanding in their brain. But the word means that it's being concealed from them. Crypto is the word, concealed, hidden, secret, like cryptocurrency. It's being kept from them at least at this point. So this is the third time that Jesus has laid out this same kind of information. The Son of Man is going to Jerusalem, will be handed over to the leadership. I'm going to be arrested, beaten, flogged, I'll be killed, and on the third day I'll rise again. At least 3 different times we've seen it in the gospel so far. And I'm assuming he may have said it other times as well that are maybe not recorded for us. And so then after this quick reminder, as they are heading to Jerusalem for the last time, I mean, where did it go? I have too many pages. They should be in a book. Verse 7. Oh, there it is. Mark says that Jesus is leading the way. The disciples were astonished, and those who followed were afraid. Okay, so the disciples cannot believe what they're doing, that Jesus is leading them back to Jerusalem, because it's not been that long since they've been there, and they tried to kill him, so he left, and then he had to leave again because they were ready to kill him. And here we are one more time heading into the teeth of the beast. Astonished can mean lots of things. I think they are shocked and surprised that Jesus is making this decision, and all those who followed. So anybody who's been a part of the crowd who's not a disciple, and there are many. It's not just Jesus and the 12 all the time, but there are women who are following Jesus. There are other people who just like we'll see in just a bit, because of what he has done, they decide they're going to follow him as well. So those folks probably don't have all of the information that the disciples do. They don't have all that experience with Jesus being a fugitive from the Pharisees, but they are afraid of what could possibly happen. And that does not slow Jesus down from going to Jerusalem. He's leading the way. He is not being drug kicking and screaming. He is taking his people along with him. And then the next thing that that Matthew and Mark record for us is a conversation between Jesus and James and John. Luke doesn't record it. John doesn't record it. But Matthew and Mark do. So why don't we look at Matthew 20. Matthew and Mark have the same kind of conversation. There is Matthew includes somebody else in the story, so we'll start with what he says. Then the mother of Zebedee's sons came to Jesus with her sons, and kneeling down, asked a favor of him. "What is it you want?" he asked. She said, "Grant that one of these two sons of mine may sit at your right and the other at your left in your kingdom." "You don't know what you're asking," Jesus said to them. "Can you drink the cup I'm going to drink?" They answered, "We can." Jesus said to them, "You will indeed drink from my cup, but to sit at my right or left is not for me to grant. Those places belong to those for whom they have been prepared by my Father." When the 10 heard about this, they were indignant with the two brothers. Jesus called them together and said, "You know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them. Not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be your slave, just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many." Okay, so there's a few things that I think we can understand about the disciples' understanding. Mark's version is the same, except that mom is not involved. They're the ones who do the asking. "We want to sit at your right and left hand." You may remember that James and John are, I don't know a good word. They are a little aggressive. They're a little forceful, a little fiery. Earlier, when something went wrong, they go to Jesus and say, "Hey, Lord, let us call down fire from heaven to burn up these turkeys who didn't listen to you." That's not why we're here. They're referred to as the sons of thunder. They've got this big, very reactive kind of personality, and it's pretty clear that translates into lots of different things. Like they've been with these brothers of theirs for months, these other disciples, but as soon as they get an opportunity, they're going to try to push their own agenda. So I think it does tell us what the disciples believed about Jesus. They know, at some level, they know that Jesus is the Messiah. The Messiah is going to take the throne of David in Jerusalem. Jesus has said, "Brothers, we're going to Jerusalem." Oh, it's time. It's time. And so frickin' frack go run into Jesus when nobody else is looking to say, hey, we want to put in a good word. For dibs on shotgun, essentially. Can we sit? We want to sit at your right and left hand. When you take the throne in Jerusalem, can we be right there beside you? If it's Matthew's version, it's mom that's making the request. And I always have had the view that she kind of grabs them by the ears and she's dragging them up along and they don't want to be there. At least they don't want their mom to be involved, but mom is pushing it because her boys deserve some special attention. They're if it's just the two fellas or their mom or all three of them, they're looking for special authority. They want special responsibility and recognition from Jesus in his new kingdom. Now, the fact that Matthew says one and that Mark says another doesn't mean that one's right and the other's wrong. It's just probably a matter of perspective. Matthew is a disciple. He is there when this is going down. Mark is getting this information probably from Peter years later. So if I'm going to choose one or the other, I'm probably going to go with what Matthew has to say. And I said something about this a minute ago. There are always women with Jesus. The flannel graphs from 1979 did not lead me to believe that was true. And all those Sunday school classes with all the pictures and all the cutouts and everything. I mean, when you saw Jesus and the disciples, it's Jesus and 4 flannel pictures of 3 guys each, that you could arrange however you wanted. But this is a big group. It's at least a couple dozen people, if not more, and there are men and women. If we look at Matthew 27, verse 56, it says, "Many women were there watching from a distance. They had followed Jesus from Galilee to care for his needs. Among them were Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James and Joseph, or Joseph, and the mother of Zebedee's sons." In Mark 15, parallel passage, women were watching from a distance. Among them were Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James the younger and of Joseph, and Salome. In Galilee, these women had followed him and cared for his needs. Many other women who had come up with him to Jerusalem were also there. And then in John 19, which is at the cross, near the cross of Jesus, stood his mother, his mother's sister, Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. Okay, so we have the identity of at least 4 women who are clearly with Jesus wherever he goes, from Galilee all the way down to Jerusalem. Now, why am I making a big deal out of this? Because one of the women who is always with him is the woman who is doing the asking. Matthew says the mother of Zebedee's sons. That's the wife of Zebedee. That's James and John's mom. So if you take all the pieces from all those passages together, it seems mostly clear, without having to do too much, twisting and contorting, that this woman who is asking for special favors for her sons is Jesus's aunt. The mother of James and John is married to Zebedee. The Gospels tell us that that woman is a sister of Mary, who's Jesus' mother, and that woman is named Salome. Like I said, you have to put the pieces together, but it's not very hard because in all 3 of those passages, there is the mother of Zebedee's sons, Salome, and his mother's sister that's mentioned, but you also have Mary, the wife of Clopas, who is the mother of James and of Joseph, and there's Mary Magdalene. Those other 2 women are mentioned in all 3 clearly. And then there's this other woman who is identified either as the mother of Zebedee's sons or Mary's sister or Salome. Like, well, I don't think it's wrong for us to just assume that one woman identified 3 different ways is the same lady. So So Salome, the sister of Mary, who has been attending Jesus, following her boys around, helicoptering Jewish mother, apparently. She's been with Jesus all along. And she would love to see her boys to get special seats beside their cousin Jesus. I mean, they are related. Family is forever. So at least in Utah. Got to take care of your kid.
They're my old grandpa.
I was singing that song to myself just the other day. So, Jesus, when you come into your kingdom, James on one side, John on the other, is that cool with you? Can they have those chairs? And instead of being angry or flying off the handle, Jesus asks this really intense question. In Mark's version, it's a little bit longer than Matthew's. Jesus says, "Can you drink the cup I drink, or be baptized with the baptism I am baptized with?" What cup? Well, in the Old Testament, a cup usually is a cup of suffering, pain, trouble, and difficulty. This baptism would be a symbol of really sort of like a flood of trouble, being totally immersed into something. So he is essentially saying, James, John, can you two endure what I'm about to go through? And because they're young and full of themselves, like, well, yeah, sure, I'm good. We're good. Yeah, we absolutely can do that. And what's Jesus's answer? Well, guys, you're right. Actually, you will. You will face the same kind of suffering that I have endured. You'll be overwhelmed by all of this, just as I am. You'll be caught up in this flood as well. James dies as a martyr. John dies in exile as a very old man. Alone. So they both would have been well acquainted with suffering and trouble in their lives. Anything about that part of that paragraph so far? It's pretty nervy. I look forward to seeing this video. What's the facial expressions? How does this play out? Because the next part kind of indicates that maybe things are not always exactly kumbaya, buying the world a Coke and singing in harmony all the time with the disciples. When the rest of the disciples, the other 10, hear what the Thunder Boys have asked for, when they see that these two brothers are kind of jockeying for position amongst the disciples, they get indignant. I wish that the NIV would stop using that word, because I don't know what it means. I have to look it up every time. And there's really not a better explanation than they were sorely displeased. Ticked, hacked off. Other words that I don't say it anywhere, but certainly not at church. They're peeved. I'm sure they're ready to lay into them. It is anger or annoyance at a perceived unfair treatment. It is not fair. You know why it's not fair? Because I didn't think of it first. They're mad that these two are looking for greatness and authority and preeminence, and that they're using their mother to do it. And I would say, because I have brothers, I'm mad because I didn't think of it first. I wish I would have thought of it. And then Jesus gives what I think is maybe one of his most important lessons. in Matthew 20 verses 26 to 28, or Mark 10 verses 43 to 45. They're essentially identical. He says to them, fellas, you're so worried about authority and and prestige and power. That's what the Gentiles do. That's not how we operate. Okay. The rulers of the Gentile, the Romans, they're all about power and control and authority. Even the Jewish leadership is all about that. You know, we determine what's right and what's wrong. We say who lives and dies. We've got the power. You should bow before us. Gentlemen, that's not the way this works. Whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant. Forget about trying to get to the head of the line. You have to be a servant. Whoever wants to be first must be the slave of all, for even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. Because I have the power and the marker, I will. So Jesus does use a couple of different words there in his lesson. Whoever wants to be the greatest must be a servant. That's diakonos. The verb form is diakoneo. And in just sort of like everyday conversation outside the New Testament, this is the guy who brings you your drink and your entree at the restaurant. Your waiting tables. You are a server. Inside the church world, we make it minister. That you're ministering to the needs of others. We wouldn't necessarily call somebody a minister, but we would call them a servant. It is willingly choosing to take care of the needs of someone else. Yes, ma'am.
Is this the same, I'm more familiar with the wording in the King James because that's when I studied it. But is this the same verse that says, uses the word last? For instead of,
I think this is a different spot. Because here the emphasis is not on if you want to be first, I'll be last, and the last will be first. That's somewhere else. But here it is, if you want to be the king sitting on the throne, then you've got to take on the towel. No,
you
you're
start at the bottom.
you're servant, exactly. Greatness in the kingdom is not measured by how close you sit to the throne or how much power you have. It is measured by the good that you do for others. Often a diakonos was the servant of a king. And it was not unusual for a diakonos to give up his own needs and interests for the benefit of somebody else. So that's what he says first. Whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant, must be your diakonos. And then he says, what? You must be slave to all. It's a different Greek word. What's my news? Making me mad. So the first one is diakonos. The next one is a doulos, doulos. Now, sometimes they were used kind of interchangeably, but there is kind of a little different shade of meaning. A doulos is a bond servant, a bond slave that you are bound to the master, you're bound to the house. You're still going to carry out all the same duties because your master has told you to, but you are you are devoted to another, to the disregard of your own interests. Here you are, you still have some kind of will about it. I'm choosing. Here you're all the way devoted to meeting the needs of others. Whoever wants to be great among you has got to be this kind of servant.
Is it, is the bottom of, is it because he's owned by a master? He has to. The top.
Well,
is-
he is bad. Not, like chains
Yeah,
at
but
wrists,
he's owned.
but
has to.
he is controlled by the master and has no choice.
On the top one, you have a choice,
Some.
so.
Now, I will say that often those two words are used interchangeably, but there are sort of shades of meaning. Okay, the upshot of it all is that Jesus says to these young men who are trying to nudge and budge their way to the front of the line to get the biggest piece of cake and whatever it is, they want the best for themselves. Jesus says, stop doing that. That's not the way the kingdom works. The kingdom works based on this, not on power and authority, but on service and compassion, willingness to lay down your life. Like I said, I think this is probably one of the most important lessons that he teaches his disciples, and certainly that applies to us as well. Jesus did not come to be served by people like this. Jesus came to be this kind of servant. I am choosing to put your needs ahead of my own. That's the end of the verse. I did not come to be served, but I came to be the servant and to give his life as a ransom. Since I'm on a roll, I'll go with this one too. The Greek word for ransom is lutron. It is the price that is paid for redeeming or releasing a slave, liberating people from bondage, setting them free, paying the ransom. And that's what Jesus is doing. He is liberating everyone who will believe from the misery and the penalty of their sins. He is setting the captives free. I came to lay down my life and to pay the price with my life for the freedom of others from sin and from death.
Do you suppose that people then were confused because Jesus was not only a servant, but a leader? Maybe he was doing when he began it, but more of a servant.
Do I think that they would have been confused by the fact that he was both servant and leader? I don't think so. Maybe initially, but they've been with Jesus long enough, at least the disciples have been, to see that what he's teaching and leading toward is exactly the way that he lives his life. No, because in the past and in the next several days, Jesus is going to show this very truth. He's going to be the one who serves his disciples at the Last Supper. He'll be the one that, even though he is the teacher, the master, the rabbi, that even if he is the Messiah, that he is the one who is crawling around on his hands and knees, washing off the dirty feet of every one of those disciples in that room. The host is not supposed to do that. He has people who will do that job for him. But Jesus takes the towel and the basin and he washes the feet. I think that's why this passage is so really important to understand that Jesus wasn't teaching one thing and living another way. It's absolutely lockstep consistent. I have compassion for the lost and the least of humanity. There is nobody that I won't speak to, nobody that I won't touch. Nobody is too far away from me. I will always deal with everybody. We're supposed to love our neighbors as ourselves, and so he has shown that over and over and over and over again. I think it's probably harder for us to wrap our heads around that now than maybe it was for them. Because we don't like, well, at least if you believe what you see in TV and movies and the news, we think that a leader cannot show compassion or sympathy or empathy, that they're gonna ride roughshod over the top of everybody. Be a strong leader, don't get bogged down with emotions, you make the right choice no matter what. You sacrifice the little people to get to your objectives. And Jesus is exactly the opposite of that. What did I actually write down? Those who want to be lifted up and rewarded ought to not worry about their seat, but about their service. The greatest in the kingdom are those who care for the needs of others rather than those who just want the power or prestige of sitting near the throne. Don't seek glory, seek to serve. And then Jesus didn't come to be a powerful potentate, ruling on high from his glorious, exalted throne. He came to take the place of the many, to die as a substitute. And that's what Jesus says it means to be great in the kingdom. Philippians chapter 2, which we talk about a lot because it's, again, such a powerful passage. He emptied himself. He came down, took on the form of servant, willing to suffer that way, all the way to death on a cross. And because he was willing to humble himself that way, to take that low position, God then exalted him to the highest place that there is. These men are looking to be exalted without any of the humility. Jesus says humility comes first. Service comes first. Others come first. Questions or comments? Are you buying it? Okay. Only got a half a page left. That seems about right. So the next thing that occurs in Matthew and in Mark, I believe, is that they're going to go through Jericho. Okay, so they're in Ephraim. They're heading through Jericho up this road to Jerusalem. You can actually kind of see on this map that there is a little, like a valley that runs through there. That's where that road was traveled into. And Jesus performs another miraculous healing. We'll look at Matthew's version. As Jesus and his disciples were leaving Jericho, a large crowd followed him. 2 blind men were sitting by the roadside, and when they had heard that Jesus was going by, they shouted, "Lord, Son of David," or Jesus, Son of David, depending on the text, "have mercy on us." The crowd rebuked them and told them to be quiet, but they shouted all the louder, "Lord, Son of David, have mercy on us." So Jesus stopped them and called them. "What do you want me to do for you?" he asked. "Lord," they answered, "we want our sight." Jesus had compassion on them and touched their eyes. Immediately they received their sight and followed him. So Jericho, is a very old city. It had been around for a very long time. Joshua led the Israelites in a battle against Jericho. the walls of the city fell down, and the prophecy was that that city would never be rebuilt. People had tried to live in that old city on and off. But they ended up building sort of like new Jericho just down the road a little ways. Herod was rebuilding Jericho. He had a palace there. And so while it's not really clear, because Mark's version is just a little different, and Luke, Mark 10 and Luke 18. One says, as they were going into Jericho, there was a man. Matthew says, while they were leaving Jericho, there were two men. I don't know. I don't know why one sees one and one sees two. Are they going into Jericho or coming out of? Well, if they're leaving old Jericho and they run across a guy before they get to New Jericho, it could be both. That they're leaving Jericho and entering Jericho at the same time. So yeah, it's not unusual for a beggar, especially a blind beggar, to be sitting along the side of the road. We see that kind of thing all the time. If you drive from South Ogden over into Riverdale, right there at the corner, the Subaru place, there's always at least one guy in the corner there looking for a handout. Why? Because people got to go through there. There are a couple exits down in Salt Lake City that every time I've been there, there's always been a guy at the bottom of that exit with his sign looking for some help because everybody passes by that spot. And the same is true here. This road is very well traveled. There's going to be a lot of people coming by. His prospects of getting some help are really good. Whether it's one man, like Mark and Luke say, or if it's two men, like Matthew says, or if it is a man with a specific name that Mark gives, he calls the man Bartimaeus, the son of Timaeus. The reality is the same. He's blind, been blind. He is a beggar and he's looking for help. And when he hears that Jesus is coming by, he asks for some help. Matthew, Mark, and Luke, it's all the same. Heard that Jesus was coming by. Lord Jesus, son of David, have mercy on me. If you want to put it in Latin, that's Kyrie eleison, or Greek, which is a Mr. song from 1980 something. Lord, have mercy on me. Lord, have mercy on me. That's a great prayer for us to pray. And Jesus calls out to him. What do you want me to do for you? You want some change? You want a sandwich? What can I do for you? Well, he's making it clear. What do you really want me to do? Well, if you're asking, I would really like to see again. Because since he's a beggar, he can't work. He's not with his family. He's living on his own on the side of the road, dependent on the kindness of strangers. If you can see, all that changes. I want to see. And so Matthew says that Jesus touches the eyes of the two men. Mark and Luke don't include the touching, and that he just says, your eyes are open. The sight is restored immediately. And what's the reaction of the beggar?
They start falling.
Does he believe that he's Messiah all the way? I don't know. He at least believes something about Jesus because he calls him the son of David, which would have been a title you attributed to the Messiah. Is he in it all the way? I don't know. At a minimum, he's going to follow Jesus at least up to Jerusalem.
I would think that if my sight was restored like that, I'd be all in. And you know how we talked about being blind and now we can see. These aren't parables.
Now, this is not a figure of speech. This is absolutely a physical reality. 1 minute ago, all I could see was black. And now I see everything in brilliant living color. I see everything that's moving on. And Jesus says that it is the faith that has made them well when you look at Mark and Luke. The belief in Jesus is what has made the healing possible. And the ironic thing is that he's about to go up to Jerusalem, where if only the people there would have the same perspective, that they believed who Jesus was, so their eyes could have been opened as well. They really could have understood who he was for sure. And this, the end of that event, marks a significant turning point in all the Gospels. The next thing that we'll read about when we get together next time is Jesus entering into Jerusalem. Although we may end up having to talk about being anointed in Bethany for that. But we are now in the last week of Jesus's life. Okay, any questions or comments, things you thought about while I've been talking? Wow, what a gifted communicator. All right. It doesn't hurt to ask questions. I'm not afraid of questions. You're welcome to ask them now or to send me a note later if you think of anything. That's really okay. If you have any watching from the YouTube channel, feel free to make a comment, subscribe, follow it, like it. So every time I do a trick on YouTube, you'll be made aware. I'd hate for you to miss something.